Alright, so we are here with Oz, the star, one of the co-stars there of Rhino Wars. I'm not sure if I can call you a co-star though, because you're not really there to star, you're there to get a job done.
Right.
So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks for being here, definitely. So let's get to your background a little bit. I understand that you were actually born in Iran during a very turbulent time in 1980, and your parents wanted to get you to, I guess, a better place here in America. Could you explain that and kind of go through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in Tehran, the capital of Iran, back in 1980. And as most people know, back in 1980, Iran was going through both a war between Iraq and also a civil unrest inside the country. So they were overthrowing the Shah. So there was chaos. I mean, there was a civil war going on as well as a war going on outside. So my parents decided to flee the country. My father's an electronic engineer and my mother's a nurse. He decided that he wanted to go somewhere where their kid wasn't exposed to warfare. So they decided that they were going to move to Germany initially. My father went all the way to Germany and then realized that he couldn't get back. They'd shut down the borders. So my mom sold everything that she had and she kept on to her wedding ring. She hid that somewhere. And she smuggled me across the border. So she would tell me frequently about times when she had to go into the safety and shelter of arms dealers and human smugglers and so forth, and smuggle me across deserts and plains and evade. They had a shoot-on-sight policy at the time, so anybody that was caught trying to leave the country was shot on sight as an act of treason.
Wow.
So she took a great risk to get me out of that warfare.
How long did that take? How long was that process of her doing that?
You know, I'm still working on the process of getting her to write that story. It's something that I would really like her to be able to share. I've got kids myself, and I'd really like to be able to share that story. It's my family members are all very spread out, far and few in between, and it's a part of my history that I'm very interested in and I want to know more about. So I don't know exactly how long it took. I imagine that it took her a couple weeks to get across the border on foot. But it's a pretty harrowing story.
Yeah, definitely. So then you went to California, and you joined the military at age 17. You want to talk about what made you join the military, what you liked about it, and your experience there?
Well, I'll be honest. I was kind of a hooligan when I was a kid. When I was 17 years old in high school, my highest achievement was the number of days I ditched school. I barely passed high school. I took the test and I did well on the test, and the students and the teachers always accused me of cheating. But I managed to get by on the test, and I managed to graduate high school on time. I got in some trouble when I was younger, and I found myself with an alternative. Either go to jail or go to the Army. And the Army was something that I really wasn't interested in. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. I was a brat. You know, I was just a spoiled kid, and I was used to doing what I wanted to do, and that kind of structure in my life was a little bit scary. So I joined the Army in an effort to do something different, to get out of trouble, to get away from the people that had influenced me in a negative way. And I found myself a little bit over my head initially, but I found that I had a resolve in me that wouldn't let me quit. I had an opportunity to walk away from military life, and I realized that I could never walk back and look at myself in the mirror and say that I quit. So I just kept pushing, and I found myself now with 15 years in. Well, come in August, it'll be 15 years. So.
Wow. Now, you've gone through special warfare school. Do you want to explain about that and, what drew you to that? I mean, you got into the military, like you mentioned, you weren't really into it, but you got into it, try to do something different. And then what drew you to special warfare and such?
Well, once I got into the military, I got in on an 11 X-ray program, which is basically 11 series is a combat arms infantryman MOS. An MOS is your military occupational specialty, so it defines what you do in the military. So I found myself as an infantryman, as an 11 Bravo, running around the trees with machine guns and setting camp up in places and conducting ambushes and stuff like that. I found that I was really good at it. I was in great shape. I had a knack for tactical sense. Things made sense to me. The weapons made sense to me. The tactics and the strategies that were involved just came to me naturally, so I wanted to do the next best thing. We had a Green Beret that showed up to one of our units, and he stood there and his hat was tilted back and he had his hands in his pockets, and he wasn't clean shaven. I must have done 20 million push-ups for putting my hands in my pockets. I figured, Uncle Sam issued me pockets in my pants, so I'm supposed to put my hands in them, especially when it's freezing up in Fort Lewis, Washington State. But apparently they're not made for hands. They're made for holding other things. So this guy is standing in front of me. He's a sergeant first class. He's got his green beret, and it's kind of pushed back to the side, and he had his name tapes were kind of scraggly. He wasn't in a starched uniform. I just looked at this guy and I was like, you know what? That's what I want to do. I don't want to be a scrubby, homeless looking guy, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to be known for what I did and what I was doing professionally. That's what I wanted my reputation to be about, rather than whether or not I had the shiniest boots or I had the most starched uniform. And that's really what was going on. I mean, this was the late 90s. We didn't really have much of a war going on. Mm-hmm. And so the emphasis was really on garrison uniforms and having the right length sideburns, and that kind of irritated me. I mean, I saw guys getting promoted over me because they knew what the name of the little round ball on the top of the flagpole was. When I knew all the max effective ranges of all the weapons, I knew the arming distance for the weapon systems. I knew how to engage the enemy, how to employ tactics. But those weren't the questions that my first sergeant asked me. He wanted to know how far did my plates have to be over on my Class A uniform, and what was the standard length from X to B, and I didn't know that stuff. I was a combat infantryman, so
right.
A little bit frustrated. So SF was an opportunity to go do what I wanted to do, and that was to blow stuff up and jump out of planes and be a Green Beret, be a badass. So that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So how long were you in before you did that?
I was in the infantry for about 3 years. I had a break in service. I got out. I tried to do the regular life thing. I went to college for a while. I actually got married, had a kid, started a business, and then just couldn't get rid of the itch. So I went back in like 2002, 2003.
Right. And actually, the reason that we're using the name Oz and the reason you use that is because you're still operating at some capacity, correct?
Yeah, I'm still affiliated, and I still operate with my unit. And it's really, a lot of it is personal preference. I'm a pretty private guy, so going on TV, I mean, you'll notice if you Google my name, there's nothing about me anywhere. I didn't have a Facebook or anything like that until the show came up, and that was a conversation that I had to have, because obviously it changes the dynamic of my work. I mean, there's certain things I just never will be able to do again. So took a big plunge. I figured if I really want to change my life, set my kids up for the future, I got to do something dramatic, and that's kind of coming out of my shell.
Yeah, right. So what, to what you can say, what groups have you operated with in the military?
I've worked with 3rd Group, and I've worked with 19th Group and 20th Group. I've been tasked out with a lot of other organizations, and I've done a lot of work with a lot of foreign countries. But most of those, I have to obviously, respect their privacy and their request for secrecy. So,
right.
But most of the groups that I've worked with were active duty ODA Green Beret teams. I've worked extensively with the Navy SEALs. I've worked a lot with some of our intelligence agencies, Ranger Battalion, and guys like that. And I'll tell you what, we've got some awesome guys that are on our side, and I wish there was less politics involved, because I think
yeah.
I think we would have been done with these wars a long time ago, and we would have saved a lot of lives on our side. But can't separate politics and the military, unfortunately.
Right. So getting to the show a little bit, I mean, you've worked in Africa before. How was where you worked when you before the show in Africa compared to the region you were in? Maybe climate-wise or environmentally.
Well, this was actually my first opportunity to really work prolonged in Africa. Every other opportunity that I had was really touch and go. So for me, Africa was always one of those places where it was kind of a mythical place. I grew up watching shows about Africa and Discovery Channel and stuff. My parents were huge animal conservationists, and so me having an opportunity to go was really incredible. Craig Sawyer was Sawman, our team leader. He's got some extensive experience in special operations. He was a SEAL Team 6 sniper, really accomplished professional soldier. Worked his way into show business a little bit, does some hosting shows and things of that sort. Him and I had worked together on a program, and he saw me. I guess the first impression that he saw, he said, "You'd make a great criminal or a villain on the show." And so he kind of joked about that, and I didn't think much of it. And then years later, he called me up and said, "Hey, man, I can pick up a lot of guys. I know a lot of people, but I want you to consider doing this." And so it was a great honor for a guy his caliber to come over and say, "Hey, man, I want you to do this for me." So I can thank him for the opportunity to do the show.
Yeah, and as far as season 2 goes, is there going to still be the 4-man team? Or are you guys expanding? Can you talk about that at all? Or
the dynamics of what the show is going to do is really kind of up in the air. We were all extremely proud of the project that we made. Maria Baltazzi, who's the executive producer, she took something and ran with it, and she did an amazing job. The guys, Biggs and Rob, and Saw, the dynamics of the team has just made it what it is. I mean, it made it successful, but you had to have that eye to capture it. Now, the one thing that we haven't quite figured out yet from the network is where and when they're going to continue to pick us up. Right now, the show is going to air in Southeast Asia. I got an interview later on today with an affiliate from Southeast Asia to talk about the show airing there. It just aired in Taiwan, and it should be airing in Australia and New Zealand soon too. So I imagine with the feedback, success-wise, and at that point, hopefully they'll call us back and tell us to pack our bags and do it again.
Well, yeah, hopefully it cut out for a little bit there for a minute.
Sure.
But as far as the operating environment, you being taken from a war zone when you were born and such, it is a war zone as well over there with the poaching and stuff. I mean, people are being shot on site, basically, the poachers see them because of how dangerous it is. If you can talk about that.
Yeah, here's the thing with Africa. It has changed a lot from, I think, the impression that it's left in a lot of people's hearts and minds from things that we've seen on TV. However, special operations, what we specialize in is that they're called low-intensity conflicts. Low-intensity conflicts are those wars that you don't hear about. They're the special operations activities that happen to keep people safe, that keep nuclear weapons off the streets, that keep terrorists from actually hijacking the planes, things you never hear about.
Right. Those
low-intensity conflicts are also extremely difficult and complex. In Africa, what we saw is that there is no definitive line. There is no, you're the good guy, you're the bad guy. It was a very similar terrorism mentality where you're fighting an ideology. And that made it extremely difficult because it was driven by greed. So you never knew who was on your side. You didn't know if the pilot that you were flying with was taking money. You didn't know if the veterinarian you were working with was taking money. You didn't know if the park rangers and the wardens were being honest with you because there was just such a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous amount of rumors that were being spread about the authenticity of people's intentions. So we found ourselves in a very, very complex situation, one which I don't think the four of us had ever seen before. We're used to a military structure. We're used to hitting the ground running. And in this environment, we couldn't do that. We had to learn all over again. I mean, the environment itself is trying to kill you. We're no longer the deadliest things on the ground. We got lions and we've got animals that can maim and destroy you. The rhino, for example, I mean, you're talking about 3,000 pounds of solid muscle. This thing moves through the jungle and the bush without making a sound. It's absolutely incredible. So we had to take a step back. We were extremely humbled in that process to see that, we're part of the food chain now.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, like the elephant as the one episode, yeah. So what is the major draw for the rhino horn? Well,
apparently, from what I understand, the research that I've done, there's a mix of folklore and some magic involved in the concept. The rhino horn itself is made of keratin. It's the same stuff your nails are made out of. So it has actually no properties in terms of medicinal value whatsoever. Where I have seen that it is used, if you look at some of your shampoos and conditioners, keratin is used as a stabilizer, as a base stabilizer to maintain those substances.
Okay.
Well, other than that, they don't really have a use. But what the Asian market has done, predominantly the Asian market, they have turned it into an aphrodisiac. Okay. A lot of what's going on is actually is malicious intent by the people that sell it. So what's going on is rhino horn is taken and it's powdered and it's mixed with Viagra. And they're told that it's just rhino horn. Well, right. Viagra, it's like what, $10 a pill max on the black market?
Yeah.
Well, they take this little bit of rhino horn, they mix a little bit of Viagra with it, and they tell them that it has magical properties and they sell it for exorbitant amounts of money. I mean, it's going for over $95,000 per kilogram.
Wow.
And I think gold is going for like $60,000 per kilogram. So you can see the price of this product is absolutely through the roof.
Wow.
The fact that there's less and less animals increases the demand. So it's a really, really powerful market driven by demand. There's over 22 pages in I believe it's the Vietnamese Pharmacopoeia, which is their book of medicine. It talks about how drugs are used to heal particular ailments and diseases. And this is the 2011 edition that I was flipping through, and there was 22 some odd pages dedicated to the alleged healing properties of rhino horn. So everything from hay fever to cancer, people think it'll cure it. And I had to take a step back and I had to think to myself, let's say that I had cancer, and let's say that I tried every ailment that I could think of. I've tried every chemotherapy and every drug that I can find, and nothing is helping. And somebody tells me rhino horn can heal your cancer. What would I do?
Yeah, it's a very good statement.
That's the position these people are in. The problem is that they're victims. The people that have the demand for the product, they're victims, and they're at their last resort. Then the people that are poaching the animals, they're victims too, because they're low-income Africans that make $1,000 a year. And you've got these syndicates, these crime syndicates, that are telling and marketing this horn and saying, hey, it has these healing properties. Then they're going overseas and they're paying these poachers $5,000 to go kill this animal and bring it back. Well, that's more money than that guy's going to see in several years of work.
Right.
So they're victimizing both ends of the spectrum. So the crime syndicates are extremely organized and manipulative, and they're making a lot of money off of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much money is passed around? I guess over the course of a year, let's say.
Well, let's say that a rhino horn, like right now, we have roughly, from the message that I got recently from Maria Baltazzi, who is, again, the executive producer of the show, she indicated to me that there have been over, let me see here, 359 rhinos that have been poached in the last 145 days. Okay, so let's be conservative, and let's say 300 times, let's say $400,000, which is conservative. You're talking about $120 million in 145 days.
Yeah, so about, a quarter of the year.
Right. So this is a market that is absolutely gone insane. It's gotten to the point where these poachers will hack apart a several-month-old baby rhino for several grams of this horn. I mean, that's where it's come down to.
It's disgusting. So, it's also not just about the rhinos in Africa. It's also about the rangers. I mean, they're going out there trying to do their job and trying to, preserve the rhino, amongst other things. And, they're being, shot down as well. What are your thoughts on that? What is it?
Well, it's definitely an unfair fight. You're talking about rangers. The rangers over there, they're typically locals that have lived there their entire life. They know the bush like the back of their hand. Most of them are running around in very cheap sandals or cheap shoes that aren't going to give them any protection over the terrain that they're working over. They're very, very poorly supported. Most of them have Motorola radios, if that barely have a range of several hundred kilometers. Several hundred meters. They don't have weapons. Rarely do they get weapons, but they often don't. They don't have any first aid training. There's really no network to help these guys out. So all they do is they're given a region or a territory to patrol, and they walk out there on their own often and just walk around. And we're talking about, Kruger National Park is the size of Texas. Some of the private reserves we're talking about are several hundred square miles. I mean, you got 70 miles, 75 miles of fence line along one side of this park. So you can imagine how big it is. When we were there, when we talked with some of the rangers, I was actually really surprised to see how little resources they had. They had no concept of, being able to defend themselves. They knew that if they ran across some poachers, the only chance that they had was to ambush them at close proximity, where they were unable to shoot at them and they could get their hands on them and physically restrain them. So it's an absolutely backwards fight. These poachers are firing cannons, a .458. It'll put down an elephant with one shot.
Right.
The reality is even with our sophisticated body armor, the back face deformation, which is the amount of impact that is absorbed by the backside of the plates, it would have killed us anyway.
Yeah.
So it would have been absolutely devastating for us to be engaged in a firefight with these guys, just outgunned, basically.
Right. Now, who brings down those directives of them not having weapons and such?
A large majority of it comes from the government. The government strongly regulates who can have weapons and who cannot. And you would have thought of all the places you could go cowboy, you'd think Africa would be one of them. But you'd be amazed. The political the scenario there is so bad. There's so much turbulence in it. And I think a lot of it is because Africa is learning to be reborn at this time. And there's a lot of transfer of power, and there's a lot of conspiracy being done, conspiring, I should say, being done,
right,
in order to leverage power in certain people's pockets. And so nobody's really that concerned about people protecting their property or the animal rights or conservation, because the country itself is in a condition of turmoil. So the focus is really there. So the laws aren't there to protect the animals. Every other country in Africa, except for South Africa, I believe, has a shoot-on-sight policy. So all the poachers, knowing that, they come to South Africa because they know that they're not in danger when they poach there.
Right. Now, going into the Rhino Wars mission, I guess is what you call it, going into it and then coming out of it, what were your thoughts going into it, and what were your thoughts going out of it, and how did that change?
Going into it, I thought that it was going to be a pretty simple thing. I thought to myself, hey, you've got the most well-trained soldiers in the world going in to fight a group of thugs. I perceive them to be like a bunch of gangbangers on the streets. The reality of it is that they have a very sophisticated network. They already knew we were there before we got there. We got to places and we were astounded to see that they call it the Bush Telegraph, and it's kind of like in Somalia, where they set off the tires to signal smoke that there was a motorcade coming in that direction, or it had left the base. Well, by the time we had left our station and we were moving in a direction, we could tell, we were told that they knew that we were there, they knew we were coming, they knew what we had, what we were doing, how long we were going to be there. So the communication network was extremely sophisticated. The resources that the poachers have put together, including thermal imagery, night vision, suppressed weapons, helicopters, tranquilizers, at the time they far surpassed what we thought that they could do. So we had a strong learning curve to identify what the capabilities of our enemy were. Having left there, in hindsight, now we see what we're up against. Going back, I think we can sway the tide. I think with the technology that we can get our hands on, with the understanding of the cultural differences, because there's a tremendous amount of spiritualism that is involved in Africa. There's a lot of superstition still that people believe. So I think knowing that and having learned that, having created the network of friends and trusted allies, I think we can make a significant impact if we go back.
Right. Now, the whole basis is preserving a species that is basically becoming extinct. How fast is that happening?
Well, when I was looking at the numbers, I made a guess. I said maybe 5 years. The reality is that every single year so far, the poaching has increased exponentially. Last year, there was about 600 animals killed, just over 600 animals. This year, it's only a couple months into the year, they're almost at 400. So the numbers are just astonishing. And I don't want to say that we might have somehow pushed that, but I think the fact that they knew that we were gone, I think that gave them the green light to be more brazen than they've ever been before, knowing that we might come back. So
right.
One of my fears is that we might have influenced that tide, and that tide right now, the way that it's going, I don't foresee that these animals will live another 2 years.
Wow. So as far as the show goes, what was the most surprising thing during that whole experience, for you at least?
Africa had a lot of surprises for us. I would say that one of the most it never really hit home. When you're sitting on an ambush line with 3 professional soldiers, you're waiting in the middle of Africa and you can hear lions behind you and there's a full moon over your head and it just hits you and you go, hey, you're in Africa surrounded by lions and you're hunting criminals.
Yeah.
It was just, the whole thing was surreal. I don't think a single day went by that I didn't thank Saul and the team for the opportunity to be there. I mean, it was just incredible. One of the things that Maria said to me really sunk in, and initially when I first met her, she said that Africa will change you. Africa will leave a mark in you, that it will somehow change you, and you'll never be the same again. And I kind of shrugged it off, and I said, I've been to a lot of places and I've seen a lot of things.
Yeah.
But she's absolutely right. I mean, Africa is a magical place, and I don't think that I could specifically say one thing was amazing, because every time I looked around, I was saying, oh my God, a giraffe, oh my God, a cheetah, oh my God, this, oh my God, that. It was just incredible. I felt like a little kid.
Yeah.
I think I must have looked like a little kid, actually.
Yeah, and I'm sure at some points the poachers might not have been the deadliest thing there.
Oh, absolutely not. I can tell you, for example, on one of our ambush lines, prior to going out there, we were told that there was a very aggressive male lion that had actually killed 2 rangers shortly before our arrival there. So this animal was killing territorial-wise, almost like a protective-wise, not so much to eat, but he was killing to kill.
Right.
So as we were out there, we were on our patrol. We had set up an ambush. We had been told that the animals were circling us, that they were tracking us. Saul made a great call. The conditions in the environment of the ambush line had become very hostile, had become dangerous not only for us but also for the camera crew. At that point, he decided to can it. He decided, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. The risk has now surpassed the likelihood of our success, and we can't risk the lives of our team or any of the affiliates here that are helping us film. So we called and we started walking back. Well, in the process of making our evacuation, a lot of the camera crew wanted to get in positions where they could film our movements. So they wanted to get out in front of us or behind us or to the side of us and film us from a distance and watch our movements.
Right.
And we found that we had to quickly put ourselves in a protective detail and bring them back in. So we were walking in a diamond formation, almost like a PSD element, pulling these guys back in every 5 minutes because they wanted to get out and get this great shot.
Right.
Well, shortly after getting back to base, we found out that we'd been tracked that entire time. That lion, the whole pride had been on our tail the entire time, and there was tracks on top of our tracks the entire night.
Wow.
So, yeah, definitely not the toughest kids in the crowd anymore.
Exactly. So what was the most difficult, I guess that was pretty dangerous, but what was the most difficult or dangerous experience you had there?
I think the most difficult position that I felt myself in was not understanding what the exact defined boundaries of our operations were, and then also not knowing exactly what the expectations were of us. And a lot of people like to think that these things are, they're staged and that they're made up and that they have an idea of what they want us to do, and that this day you're supposed to go out and you have to set up an ambush, and this day you go out and you do a patrol. The reality is that is the furthest thing from the truth. This was really a documentary was what it was. It was a special operations team that was sent out to do a job, and this crew happened to follow us.
Right.
Some things were set up, like the Big Five training that we had in the very first episode, where we had Adrian, the professional tracker, and Hunter come talk to us about how to engage the Big Five. That stuff was staged. That stuff was set up for us to experience it. But walking into a herd of lions surrounding a angry group of elephants, that wasn't staged.
Right.
Telling us to unload our weapons and to stow them and to walk into the jungle, with no defensive abilities, that wasn't staged. None of us are actors, so the emotions and the frustrations, the laughter, everything you saw was us being us. There was no point in which, hey, let's pretend to catch a poacher over here, or hey, let's pretend to do this.
Right.
Everything was real, which made it so much more difficult for the executive producer and the show, but it was real. Everything was real. Bullets were real, the shooting was real, the gunfire was real, the threat was real, the lions were real. There was nothing that was staged. So it was frustrating at times. We're setting up ambush after ambush, and I think one of the team guys, I think it was Biggs, he said it. I mean, criminals have no discipline. I mean, if they're going to be late to something, they're going to be late to it. You're talking about professional soldiers. We're 5 minutes, 15 minutes ahead of time. So we set up in an ambush. We wait there for 4 hours, and the guys never show up because they get lazy.
Right. It's real life.
It gets frustrating, man. And we wanted to nail them.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that, you said, the executive producer can't really plan for, is real life. I mean,
yeah,
that's what happens.